Hello everyone and welcome to the fourth episode of Gear Chat with Parth, and today I'll be showing you how to set up a Strat-style guitar with the tremolo or vibrato set one way or dive only. Now for those of you who like to have your tremolo set floating, don't worry because I'll make a separate video just for that. For now, let's get right to it. So before we begin, I want to take you over a list of things that you need in order to set up your guitar properly. First of all, you need to have a nice flat surface like this, a table perhaps. Then you need something to prop up your guitar and keep it stable while you're stringing it. For that you can use a wadded up towel like this or even a pillow. And next you need to have string winders. You can use any regular string winder. You don't need to have a motorized string winder like this. By the way, this happens to be the Ernie Ball Power Peg Pro. It's a very nice motorized string winder. Next we have a capo and a set of feeler gauges. You need to have these two items in order to set the relief or the curve of the neck. Then you will need radius gauges. These gauges go under the strings and then they help you adjust the radius of the saddles to match the radius of the fretboard. Then you need to have screwdrivers, or if you can, you could buy a multi-tool like this. This happens to be the Ibanez MTZ11 multi-tool. As you can see, it has different Allen keys, screwdrivers, and even a spanner. It's a very useful tool that you can take with you in your guitar's case or something. Up next we have a string action gauge. This will be really helpful to set the action of the strings, and then you can up next we have tuners. You can use headstock mounted clip-on tuners, but they are only good for tuning and not for intonation. If you want to adjust the intonation, then you need a dedicated tuner like this. This happens to be the Boss T15, but you can also use pedal tuners. Next you need to have a couple of spanners on hand so that you can tighten parts like the nut over here on the output jack, or over here at the tuners. Next you need to have a set of Allen keys, both small and large, so that you can adjust small screws like the one on your saddle, or even as big as your truss rod nut. Next up we have an electrical contact cleaner. This is very useful if you want to clean out the electronics and electrical parts like potentiometers, input output jacks, and you can use this not only on your guitar but also on your amplifier or your pedals even. I personally like using deoxit, but in India it's very hard to find and it's quite expensive as well. So the CRC226 is a very nice alternative and it's very cheap compared to deoxit. Last but not the least, we have a pencil. You can actually use a pencil to lubricate the nut of your guitar. What you have to do is just run the tip inside the slots of each strings, and the graphite will act as the lubricant. Now let's start with the setup process. The first thing that we'll do is we'll remove all the strings. We'll start by loosening them one by one, and then what we'll do is we'll cut them right down the middle of the fretboard. What you do is you take your winder and you start winding them loose. And once the string is loose enough, you take the cutter and you cut the string around, around the middle of the fretboard. Not necessarily that you do that in the middle, but it's better because you get an equal length of string and you can dispose it once you've got both the strings out, and you can wrap your string around like this and dispose it later. A quick note, sometimes when removing the old strings, you'll find that one of the strings is stuck. It's stuck and you can't remove it from the block. So what you do is you use the old leftover string, preferably a thick one, and you use that to poke the other stuck string out from the block, and it should come out. Okay, now once all the strings are off, you can proceed to cleaning the instrument, which includes not just cleaning the body and the neck of the guitar, but also the electronics. Now, make sure you don't use products like WD-40 or Windex because they are not good for the body or the neck. They can really damage the finish, and especially in the case of the neck, if it's an acoustic guitar or it's not a maple neck, then it can get into the pores of the fretboard and it can damage the neck of your guitar. If you want to clean the body of your guitar and also a maple neck which has a sealed finish on it, you can use naphtha. But be very careful because naphtha is also lighter fluid and it's very dangerous, obviously. So make sure you're wearing proper gloves and you don't have a lighter or any kind of combustible product nearby. And if you want to clean the electronics of your guitar, which include the potentiometers, the output jack, you should use a dedicated electrical contact cleaner like Deoxit, or you can use, if you're in India, you can use this, the CRC 226 power spray. It's a very nice, cheap alternative to Deoxit, and it's easily available here in India. Now if you want to clean out your electronics, which include the potentiometers, the output jack, and the 5 or 3-way switch, whatever you have, what you do is, in the case of potentiometers and also the switch, you may or may not have holes on the pick guard like the ones that you see here, but if you do, you can just simply spray the contact cleaner in there, or in any case what you can do is just slightly pull on the potentiometer knob and spray it from the top, and then what you do is just work the knob back and forth, back and forth. This will really get inside the shaft and clean out all the dust, all the moisture that's been accumulated over time. And sometimes you can even feel that it's much smoother to operate. Once you feel that it's very smooth, you can always have the guitar plugged into an amp or something and just check how clean the knobs are, if they are making any noise when you work them, and things like that. You can also do the same for the switch. You just introduce a bit of the contact cleaner inside the cavity over here, and then just work the switch. Just flip it back and forth quickly. The idea is to have the liquid from the liquid chemical from the contact cleaner get into all the nooks and crannies and really flush out all the dirt that's been accumulated. Now you use a wet paper towel and just clean off the excess, and don't worry if this gets all over your guitar. It's not that bad for your guitar, and you can always just wipe it off, and usually this stuff wipes off really almost instantly. Now if you want to clean out the output jack of your guitar, what you do is you take a Q-tip or an earbud and then you spray some of the contact cleaner right onto the Q-tip. And then immediately you introduce that and inside the And once it's on the Q-tip, you introduce that into the output jack and then just rub it. If you like, you can use just one more little spray and then use that. Once you've cleaned the output jack, what you can do is, just like the way we work the potentiometer, we work the output jack by using a cable and pushing it and pulling it in and out, in and out, and that way it cleans out any of the junk that's been accumulated inside the output jack. Now a quick word of caution about using contact cleaners. Once you've used such contact cleaners, make sure you wash your hands with soapy water, because these chemicals are really bad and they can cause very serious illnesses if you don't take proper caution. So always make sure that you use soapy water to clean your hands after using such chemicals. Now the next step is restringing your guitar. Once you've got the new strings through the block, just make sure that you pull on them so that they don't get stuck somewhere in between, because that's been known to happen. Sometimes the ball end gets stuck right before it comes out through the hole entirely. So make sure you pull on them before you start putting them through the tuners. At this point, I want to mention that if you want to set up your tremolo or your vibrato to be one way only, that's dive only, and not floating, what you should do is make sure that you have the springs on the back side removed from the block. Then next you make sure you set up these screws in a way that when the bridge is sitting flush to the body, you just screw them down enough that once it's tight, the bridge starts lifting up, and that's when you slowly back the screws off and loosen them, just for the bridge to come back to being flush with the body. Once you do that, you move to the other screws. What you can also do is use the same procedure, firstly in the inner two screws, the D and G screws, and then move to A and B, and then eventually E and the other E. Then what you do is you loosen the inner four screws even more, so that in a way this becomes a 2-point tremolo, pivoting only on the outer E string screws. Now the next step is restringing your guitar. Once you've made sure that all the strings are entirely through the tremolo block, you take your first string, make sure that the insert hole at the tuner is facing this way, so that you can pull the string straight through. And if you have a locking tuner like this, make sure it's loose, but not so loose that it falls down, because some locking pins have been known to just fall down. So just loosen it enough for your string to pass through. Once it's through, pull it all the way out. Again, make sure as you're pulling it, the string is not struck at the tremolo block end, and it's all the way through. Now I'll show you how to measure the length of the strings. Now what you want to have is at least 2 or maybe 3 wraps on the wound strings, and you can have a little more on the unwound strings. And I'll show you how to measure the length of the string to get those amount of wraps. You pull the string all the way through. What you do is, if you're on the first tuner, use 3 fingers and then bend it at the 3rd finger. Put a kink on your string like that. And what I like to use is the over and under method. So once it goes like this, take the first strap like this over, move the string up like this, and then start winding, and make sure the winds after this are all under. While you're doing this, make sure you give pressure on the string between the post and the nut with your finger, so that the winding doesn't go up. And slowly you'll feel the string tightening, and then you'll end up with one nice wrap like this. Now you don't have to tune the string to pitch, you just have to get it a little stiff and then move on to the next string. Oh, and I also want to mention that my guitar has modern style locking tuners, but if your guitar has vintage Kluson style tuners, the split shaft type, don't worry, I'll make a separate video just how to restring those. Once you're done stringing your guitar, your wind should look like this. They should not be overlapping each other, they should be uniform and all going in the downward direction. Now you might be wondering why I haven't cut the excess string off yet. The reason why is because if you make a mistake in taking the measurement of the length of the string, if it's too long or too short, what you can do is you can carefully loosen the string by pulling it back in this direction, and then you can make the adjustment of the length of the string and then put it back. If you already cut the string excess string off before and then you make then you realize you've made a mistake, there's really no going back. You just have to get a new string or a new set of strings. Once the strings are on completely, now it's time for lubricating. First we'll lubricate the nut. Like I said earlier, you don't want to tighten your strings as if they are tuned to pitch. You want to keep them a little bit loose, but just with a little bit of tension on them. The reason why is because if you want to lubricate, let's say, your nut, what you can do is you just have to loosen the string a little bit just so that you can lift it up. After that, you have the access to the nut to lubricate it. And now to lubricate the nut, we'll use a simple pencil. What you want to do is you want to take the pencil and just rub the nib inside the slot where the string would ride. If your string is too loose, what will happen is you will lubricate the nut, put your string back on, and then keep tightening it. But what happens is all the graphite that's been accumulated in the nut now will travel off. Now if you want to lubricate the metallic moving parts like the saddle or the string trees, you want to use something like this. And what you can do is you can put it on either a toothpick or a Q-tip, and then what you do is again loosen the string little bit just so that you can lift the string up, and then introduce the lubricant into the saddle slots. Once you do that, tighten the string again. Now you might think that you can use Vaseline and get away with it. Well, maybe you can, but the reason why it's not so good for your saddle or the string tree for that matter is that Vaseline attracts a lot of dirt and dust onto it, and over time it builds up and it can even corrode the moving parts. Now to lubricate the string tree, it's the same process. You loosen the strings just enough so that you can push down the string and insert the lubricant between the string and the string tree. This happens to be a roller kind of a string tree, so I'm going to apply it right into the rollers, just lightly. And then tighten your string again. Okay, so now the next step, which is a very important step to keeping your strings in tune, is stretching the strings. What you want to do here now is keep the strings almost to tune. You don't have to be exactly pitch correct, but get it near the intended pitch. And what you do is you start stretching the strings like these. You really need to do this on the wound strings, the E, A and D. You can do it on the plain strings as well, but be very careful because the plain strings could break very easily, and you don't have to really pull and tug so hard. Be gentle with it, and as you're stretching the strings, you'll realize that, as you see, they have detuned. So what you want to do is stretch the string along its entire length, check the tuning, retune, and then repeat. You want to repeat this process on every single string till the string retains its pitch. No matter how much you stretch it, it shouldn't go out of pitch. Once you've achieved that on a particular string, you can then move on to the next string. Now this can take a lot of time, but it's really helpful, especially if you're playing live. Your strings will really stay in tune. Next, we'll set the action and the string radius. To do that, we'll need the string action ruler like this. What we want to do is at the 17th fret, we'll put the action ruler. Now I like to measure my strings with 64ths of an inch. Personally, I like the high E at 3/64 and the low E at 5/64 or even 4/64. To do that, I'll put the action ruler exactly at the 17th fret and see where my string is. If it's too high or too low, I'll adjust the saddle accordingly. I'll set the action for the outer E strings first, and then I'll set the radius by using the undersaddle radius gauge. First what I'll do is I'll set the action of the outer E strings first, and then use the undersaddle radius gauge to adjust the radius of the remaining 4 strings. Once I've adjusted the action of the outer E strings, I'll introduce the undersaddle radius gauge between the D and G strings like this, and then pull it all the way towards the saddles. Now to check if the string is at correct height, I'll apply a slight bit of pressure upwards, but not too much to pull the string up, and then push down on the string like this. If the undersaddle gauge is also being pressed down, that means the height is correct. If there's a bit of a gap, then what you need to do is lower the string. But if you find that the gauge is poking the string up, you need to increase the height of the saddle. Do this and then repeat on other strings. Now we'll set the relief of the neck. To do that, we'll need a capo and a set of feeler gauges, or maybe just one feeler gauge if you know what your preferred clearance is. To do that, make sure the strings are in tune to pitch. Then introduce the capo exactly over the first fret, not before it like when you would be playing your guitar with a capo, but exactly over the first fret. And then put your finger on the 17th fret. A lot of people do it other ways, but this one works the best for me, so this is what I recommend. So you put the finger at the 17th fret, the capo is at the first fret. Now you introduce your preferred feeler gauge at the 7th fret, exactly on top of the 7th fret. What you want to feel is if the feeler gauge is traveling easy without any hindrance, or if it's poking the string up. If you find that your feeler gauge is not even going between the string and the fret, you have to give the neck more relief. That means you have to loosen the truss rod. And if there's too much of a gap between the string and the fret, you have to reduce the relief. That means you have to tighten the neck by tightening the truss rod. And when it comes to adjusting the truss rod, always remember lefty loosey, righty tighty. If you turn right, or that means clockwise, you are tightening the truss rod, and if you turn left or anti-clockwise, you are loosening the truss rod. Now the next step is intonation. Once you've made sure that you've stretched all your strings and they are staying in tune, what you want to do is you want to start getting them tuned to pitch. And to adjust the intonation, you'll need a dedicated tuner like this and a screwdriver. Yes, you can use a headstock mounted tuner, but if you are going for accuracy, which you should, you want to get a dedicated tuner like this that you can plug in directly to your guitar. What you do is, first make sure you have the volume and tone controls on 10 full on. Then move to your neck and bridge pickup. The reason why that is necessary is because the bridge pickup is the one closest to the strings, and it has the most tension near it. So sometimes it can give you a false reading because that pickup is the one that might be pulling the strings down a little bit. So you want to keep your pickup selection on the neck and the bridge simultaneously. Then what you want to do is make sure that your string, the one you're adjusting, is tuned to pitch. Now ideally you want to do this in the playing position, but for the purpose of this video I'll be doing it in this position just because it's easier to do it like that. Now to adjust the intonation, what you want to do is first put your finger at the 12th fret and play it and see where it is, if it's sharp or flat. It should be perfectly in sync with the open string, so it should be at pitch as well if the open string is at pitch. Now this also depends on the amount of pressure you give on the string, so give moderate pressure and then it should come to pitch. Once it beeps, what you want to do is you want to chime the harmonic at the same 12th fret. Now you compare the harmonic with the fretted note and you determine if it's sharp or flat. When I chime the harmonic, this string is flat. So what I want to do is I want to shorten the length of the string. So to do that, I will use the screwdriver and move it clockwise at the saddle so that the saddle goes towards the neck, thereby shortening the string. When the string is shortened, every time you do this, make sure you loosen the string a little bit, then adjust the saddle back or forth, whichever way you have to do, and then slightly bring it back to the pitch and then check again. Keep doing this. Yes, this will take some time, but it's worth the patience, because if you don't detune the string ever so slightly and then move the saddle, there are chances that you could break the string at the saddle. Now if you're done with setting the intonation, you can move on to the last step, which is cutting off the excess strings. When cutting the strings, make sure you are not cutting it too close to the tuning post. Otherwise, if you have non-locking tuners, the strings can slip out. It's very unlikely, but it's known to happen. Once you've removed all the excess strings, make sure you check the tuning, because after you've cut the string, they can go a little out of tune. So what you're going to do is check the locking post, tune them back to pitch, and you can take the extra step of stretching the strings again. Once you do that, you should have a rock solid instrument. So that was it for today's episode. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll be making separate videos for those who have vintage Kluson style tuners, and also a separate video for people who like to have their tremolo set floating. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon to get notified about my new upcoming videos. And also give a thumbs up if you like the video. Thank you for watching.